Florida school district has pulled 176 books from its libraries.
An increasing number of books were banned during this academic school year.
The fight over banning books in public libraries is escalating.
These things are dangerous, they're destructive, they're harmful, and they are against the law in South Carolina.
Obscene and pornographic. That's how Governor Henry McMaster described the book Genderqueer, a memoir.
Look at these books that have already been banned due to Republican measures. The Life of Rosa Parks.
Author Maya Kobe wrote in an op-ed in the Washington Post, removing or restricting queer books in libraries and schools is like cutting a lifeline for queer youth.
What we're looking at is the end of curiosity, the end of creativity, the end of learning even. A child in the U.S. today who isn't taught the fundamental basics of American history. And in 20 years, that child wants to tell stories. I don't know what stories that child will tell about America. They will be lies. In this age of mounting disinformation all over the world, when it is easy to dress up a lie so nicely that it starts to take on the glow of truth, the solution is not to hide the lie, but to expose it.
Good afternoon. I am Elahe Azadi, a media reporter here at the Washington Post and also co-host of the podcast Post Reports. And I'm so pleased to be joined here today by award-winning author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie to discuss the ongoing trend of banning books and also the power of the written word. So Chimamanda, please, let's welcome her. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we're doing handheld mics today, so. So welcome to Washington Post Live, and I thought we could start the conversation by really just laying out the landscape, the state of book banning, because that's part of what we want to dig into here and to understand it. So PEN America, every year, they release an index of book banning in this country. They track it, and they found that last year there was a 33% increase of book bans from the year before. I actually looked you up. You appear on this list several times. You have that distinction, I guess, is the word we could maybe use. And also the Washington Post has conducted a first of its kind of analysis of children's picture books and found that 75% of book ban challenges were with characters with LGBTQ characters, and 25% were about books accused of being, quote, anti-police. And another finding, I'm throwing so many statistics at you, is that the Post found that the majority of book bans in the 2020 and 21 school year came from just 11 people. So that's sort of the landscape that we're confronting here. So it's a lot to take in, but as an author, I wonder when you hear that, what do you see as the intellectual root of this move of book banning?
Whew.
I know, right?
Well, it's really lovely to be here, and I've been watching this the live stream, and it's just so nice to be part of this group of incredible women. One of the problems with having little clips of you be part of the introduction is everything I wanted to say has been said in the clip, so I'm just
it's okay. We can say them again. It's not a problem.
So thank you all for coming. Let's go. No.
We're going to go get coffee now. Y'all are good.
We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I'm struck by, and I knew that I don't think the book banning in this country is so much about books as it is about this kind of extreme polarization in this country. I think it's a symptom of it. I don't think we can talk about book banning without talking about polarization, because really the people banning these books don't actually read. I mean, many of them don't. It's true, though, they don't. So it's not as though they are book lovers who are really dedicated. No, they don't read. I mean, I read a piece about a woman who was challenging so many books in her public library, and when she was asked if she had read them, she said no. So she just thought, oh, this is about black people. No, this is about gay people. No, right? And so I think it's worrying, obviously. I do have to say, though, that I'm in such good company. I mean, look at all the wonderful books that have been banned. And banning doesn't work. Like, it does, I mean...
How so?
Because I, for example, if I heard a book had been banned, I would go read it. It would make it even more interesting, you know.
Especially for young people, I would imagine, right?
Exactly. It doesn't work. As just, it's not a useful way of talking about... I think maybe, I do think it's reasonable to talk about what's appropriate for children, right? I think that's a conversation that we should have, because I think there are some things that, you know, a child who's 5 doesn't need to know, a child who's 10, that sort of thing. And I think it's something to talk about, but I think that legitimate conversation has been overtaken by political polarization.
So it's been hijacked in some way.
It has been. And when I think about what's happening, I mean, now apparently public libraries, as much as public schools, are having books challenged by people who do not read. What worries me, though, is sometimes learning about people who give in to this. I mean, I really think it's important to stand up to this kind of nonsense. You know.
And how does that look for an author, for example?
I would like to go into a library and sort of see all kinds of books. I don't sit at home and think, oh my goodness, I've been banned. But
doesn't keep you up at night?
No, it doesn't. Well, first, I'm in very good company.
Right.
But it's the larger idea of even that we can ban books. You know, that. So on the one hand, I think this started, I mean, apparently sort of the root of it was COVID, which I think was a time that was difficult for everyone. So I think we all kind of went slightly mad. And afterwards, people then started this thing about not wanting their children to be indoctrinated. And I just think, I mean, when you ask about, I want to talk about it as a reader rather than as a writer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So for me, it's a question of really resistance. I think that public libraries should say no. I think that you know, public schools should say no. You know, I think we owe children the responsibility of giving them knowledge or allowing them access to knowledge. And there's a kind of courage, I think, that's lacking in the way that this has been. I think sometimes I'm not even sure that I want to talk about it. So the title of this, you know, I just...
Is it because putting too much light on it emboldens, you feel like?
I think so.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think so, yeah.
Because I've also read reporting about how school librarians, for instance, preemptively don't want to put books on their libraries because they're concerned about this. So there's the chilling effect as well. Yeah.
Yes, and particular subjects, which is also very telling, right?
Yeah.
It's often subjects that have to do with groups that are minorities. And so I think there's also a question of power there, right? Because I don't know that anybody's banning books about, I don't know, people who came on the Mayflower. So I think I think it's important to think about that as well, that book banning is about politics, and it's also, I think, about power. Right?
Yeah, and it also sounds like some of this conversation in this country is also related to this other conversation about how history is taught.
Yeah.
Right? It's related, yeah. You know, places like Florida, laws were passed that restrict how African American history can be taught, what words, the framing. And how do you respond to the belief that certain children should not feel uncomfortable or shouldn't feel discomfort, rather, when learning about history? Do you see these as related?
I think they are related. I mean, if you're banning books about Black people and Black history, and if you're challenging the teaching of Black history, you know, it's all connected. I mean, the idea that children should not be allowed to feel uncomfortable, I find it really astonishing. I mean, you know, and this is one of the things that I think on the political right, people will often say, well, facts don't care about your feelings. And it seems to me that this is one place where it's very apt. I mean, history is factual. It really shouldn't be about, you know, is the child going to feel bad? And I do think that if you teach history properly, children don't end up feeling bad. I think they end up feeling enlightened. And I'm a believer in stories. And so increasingly I've been thinking about what if we did more sort of stories in teaching history? So there's all this noise about CRT.
Critical race theory, but...
And many of the people who throw it around do not know what it means. I hardly knew what it meant myself until recently. I don't think that there are lots of people in elementary and high schools teaching children critical race theory. I don't think that's true at all. But it's been used as a reason to sort of hold back the teaching of African American history. And I think the idea of theory is the problem. So I find myself thinking, what if, right? What if it was stories instead? What if every time a child had a lesson about, how neighborhoods were formed in this country, that lesson must necessarily include how African Americans were excluded, not because they were poor, because they were black, right? And then if the child would hear stories about people who bought their houses and were sort of bullied out of their neighborhoods. Those are stories that actually happened. So you can't, so you're telling the stories, they happened. And I think by doing that, there's less of a opportunity for people to say, you're indoctrinating our children with theory, because you're telling them factual stories.
Yeah, it's interesting also bringing up story, because you had this 2009, I'm going deep cut here, TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. And you highlighted how a single repeated perspective can turn into almost an absolute or singular truth. So when you look at where we are today, have you seen strides made in that regard? Do you feel like there's a broader recognition of the danger of the single story? Because a lot of what we're talking about is, in some ways, the perpetuation of that, right?
Do I think strides have been made? No.
Period. Next question. All right. Well, do you feel like there's broader recognition by some?
Performative recognition, yes. I think that there is so in talking about, and my goodness, 2009, I feel old. In talking about the danger of a single story, and I gave that talk really because I'm a storyteller, because I'm a writer, and I really care about stories and sort of a wide range and diversity and nuance. I think that the root of good storytelling is texture and nuance. And I think we've really lost that in the way that we have public conversations. So I'm not sure that we've made a lot of progress in the single story, sadly.
Yeah, and a lot of this book banning conversation is that flattened conversation. Whew, all right, no hope there. However, I did want to talk about your most recent book, which is a children's book.
Yes.
And so speaking of, I talked about children's picture books. Your recent book it's a children's book. First of all, just tell us a little bit about that story, why you wanted to tell that story, and why did you want to write a children's book?
I wanted to write a children's book because I had a child. Before I had my daughter is 8, and before I had her, people would say, why don't you write a children's book? And I would say, no, my vision is too dark. Really, my artistic vision is dark. I'm drawn to melancholy, and I thought I don't want to be responsible for traumatizing children, because I actually love children, but I remember when my daughter was born, and it's been the most magnificent thing that's happened to me. And I remember sort of just holding her when she was little and just feeling how precious the moment was, but also having that sense that even before the moment was gone, I was already mourning it. And, and I would write things down, and I kept thinking I'm going to have to write something. And then my parents died, which completely upended my life. I adored my parents. They died in a short space of time. And then that's when, for some reason, suddenly writing a children's book became almost urgent for me. And I wrote it under a pseudonym. So I wrote it as Nwa Grace James, which literally means daughter of Grace and James, my parents. And I kind of loved the idea of writing a book, for my daughter as a daughter. And it's also a book about how my parents adored her. So it's an ordinary it's a day in the life of, we're in Lagos, where we spend half of the year. My daughter is sort of just wandering around with my scarf. The scarf that and also I wanted to sort of, do a little, Black woman shout out, because most of the Black women I know, we have things on our head when we sleep. So I wanted to educate the world on this really important point.
Yeah. Well, and why was it important to you to tell what felt in some ways like an ordinary story?
Mm-hmm. You know what? Because increasingly, I think it's important to see that the ordinary is enough. That the ordinary is okay, that we can find a lot to celebrate in just the ordinary. Because it seems to me now that sort of this heightened world we live in, there is almost, and I think this is true for many young people, a pressure to be different in some way. And I think ordinary is fine. Just a lovely, simple day. There is a lot of joy and love, I think, that's to be found in the ordinary.
Yeah, and the ordinary is what is so crucial to make the world go around, right?
It is, and it's something that I think that we all have access to, right? We all have access to the ordinary.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, and it's about the future, and also, your present analysis. In 2017, I'm sure many people here and watching at home are familiar with your guidelines for how to raise a feminist daughter. That was published in 2017. You're a parent raising a daughter. How challenging is that work today to raise a feminist daughter compared to even when you wrote that?
See, the thing about, I wrote that before I had her.
Oh, okay. So yeah, how did your perspective shift?
I can tell you it's very easy to write and pontificate about raising a child when you do not have a child. Right. So if anybody's ever going to write about raising a child, do it before you have a child. Because then when the child comes, you think, my goodness, this is a bit more complex than I thought.
Did anyone come up to you and say that? I wonder.
No, people usually ask me if I'm following my own directive.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Yeah, and I am, actually. I'm trying. But that's the thing, it's about trying. Right? It's about, there's never going to be perfection. And actually, I write in the book that you can do everything right, and your child will still turn out not right. I mean, you sort of have to hope. But I am trying. We are trying, my husband and I. And really, it's just about, for me, making sure that I'm a full person outside of being a mother. Although motherhood is so important to me. But I think it's so important for women to live in a society that allows them to be full people. And the other thing is not to raise my daughter with sort of preconceived ideas of what a girl should be. Right. That child, however, is extremely girly. I had been hoping that, sort of in the revolutionary spirit of my ideas, that my daughter would reject femininity, but nope, she's all for dolls. So
she went all in.
Yeah. So, and also, I mean, it's important to me not to be the crazy feminist mother. Because actually when she was born, I wanted to sort of say, we're not going to give her dolls. She's going to, I'm going to buy her little engineering STEM toys. But it's important not to be the crazy feminist mother, Because
it's also about her allowing
yes.
to be able to have that choice, right?
Exactly, yes. Yeah. I want her to be her full self. Yeah.
Well, we could keep talking for another 20, 30, 40 minutes, but unfortunately, we will have to leave it there. Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie, please, everyone, thank her for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be right back. Stay with us.